Welcome back to the Broadman Word, and we are continuing with the life of Noah. So the flood is over. Noah, his family, and the animals have left the ark. But one of the first things that is done is that there is this covenant between God and Noah. And of course, that contains the rainbow, which we will talk about here in a second. But with that, we are going to go back to Genesis chapter 8. We're going to start in verses 20 through 22, or the rest of the chapter. And then we will look at chapter 9, verses 1 through 17. So, with that being said, let's start in Genesis chapter 8, verse 20, and then we will go from there. Then Noah built an altar to the Lord, and took some of every clean animal and some of every clean bird, and offered burnt offerings on the altar. And when the Lord smelled the pleasing aroma, the Lord said in his heart, I will never again curse the ground because of man, for the intention of man's heart is evil from his youth. Neither will I ever again strike down every living creature as I have done. While the earth remains, seed time and harvest, cold and heat, summer and winter, day and night shall not cease. So, a couple things here before we get to chapter 9 of Genesis. First, you have one of the first things with this covenant is an offering. So you just had that year plus on the ark with these animals, and now you're having to offer some of them up, even though you're trying to remake the world. It seems interesting that you would go about doing that, but for me, it is showing that in this remade world, Noah is putting his relationship with God first. And that is incredibly important to see. And then, of course, you have the start of the covenant with the Lord and Noah, and is just this again, it's not an apology. Not at all, because again, God cannot sin. He cannot do wrong. But it is this statement that, look, I will never do this thing again. This is a very one-time act of justice that the Lord is going to show. Now, obviously, especially if you read the book of Revelation, God will show his justice in other ways. But when it comes to a global flood mode of justice, this will not be the case ever again. And I think it is interesting too, verse 22, while the earth remains, seed time and harvest, cold and heat, summer and winter, day and night shall not cease. I think it's just this idea that as of this moment, life globally will go on with a very pattern to it. There will not be this remaking of the world until the end of time. But there definitely will not be a remaking of the world through the act of a global flood. So now we get to chapter 9, and this is where we see the back and forth of, or the kind of the drawback to the Adamic covenant with the Noahic covenant. So chapter 9, verse 1, let's start there. And God blessed Noah and his sons, and said to them, Be fruitful and multiply and fill the earth. The fear of you and the dread of you shall be upon every beast of the earth, and upon every bird of the heavens, upon everything that creeps on the ground, and all the fish of the sea. Into your hand they are delivered. Every moving thing that lives shall be food for you. And as I give you the green plants, I give you everything. But you shall not eat flesh with its life, that is, its blood. And for your lifeblood I will require a reckoning. From every beast I will require it, and from man. From his fellow man I will require a reckoning for the life of man. Now, before we get to this interesting verse 6, just basically, again, that connection of be fruitful and multiply was a very big thing that God wanted from Adam and Eve to do. That Adamic covenant was this idea of, yes, be fruitful and multiply. The Garden of Eden was not supposed to just be a little dot on the map. It was supposed to grow with Adam and Eve, and then as their descendants multiplied, they would then take that Garden of Eden mindset out from them. Obviously, with the fall in Genesis chapter 3, that did not go as planned. But here you see this very familiar language from the Adamic covenant. However, there is a little bit of difference here. Whereas before, a big part of the Adamic covenant, or Adam's duty as well, was to just name the animals. Here, there is this fear that the animals have for human beings. Now, obviously, we see this in nature. Is a trembling fear, but it's also this innate fear uh, of respect because you are higher up in the food chain. There is that respect there, and so I think that could be what is being talked about in verse 2. Now, the big part that I wanted to talk about was verse 6. So let's look at verse 6. Whoever sheds the blood of man, by man shall his blood be shed, for God made man in his own image. So I think verses 5 and 6 are definitely pointing to evidence for those that believe in capital punishment. Now, of course, it doesn't mean that we don't take anything into account. If somebody is accused of murder, then we just murder them on the spot. No, of course not. We take our time. We allow the process to go, interview, all that sort of stuff in the legal system. But if they are found to murder, Genesis 9, 5, and 6 is very clear how much God is just abhorred by murder. He sees it as a great misjustice, which it is. But the reason why it is because of Christian anthropology. And what that basically means is that because of who you and I are as human beings, we are not just random cells come together over time and after several mutations from one species to another, then human beings finally came about. No, it's because God made man in his own image, the Imago Dei. That is why there's so much importance on the value and the importance of man. And that's why Christian anthropology, or the study of man with a biblical worldview, is so important. Because it allows us to see, okay, what is right and wrong? What should my morality be to those around me? Well, if I believe that man and woman are created in the image of God, that's going to help dictate my morality and how I view others around me, no matter what differences they might have to me in different areas. The biggest thing is that we are all made in the image of God, that we are all sinners separated from Him, and that we are all needing to get back to a relationship with Him. And hopefully, through the gospel, they will see that and come to know Jesus as Savior. So that is a little bit about verses 5 and 6. But then we have verse 7, just this reiteration of the fruitful and multiply. And you, be fruitful and multiply, increase greatly on the earth, and multiply in it. Then it continues. Verse 8. Then God said to Noah and to his sons with him, Behold, I establish my covenant with you and your offspring after you, and with every living creature that is with you, the birds, the livestock, and every beast of the earth with you, as many as came out of the ark. It is for every beast of the earth. I establish my covenant with you, that never again shall all flesh be cut off by the waters of the flood, and never again shall there be a flood to destroy the earth. As we mentioned earlier, this global flood event will not happen again, and that is a big part of this covenant. And again, and again, with covenants, especially with God being one party in the covenant, you will always be assured that He will always keep His part of the covenant, even if we do not. And that is, I think, that is an incredible act of grace for sure. Verse 12. And God said, This is the sign of the covenant that I make between me and you and every living creature that is with you for all future generations. I have set my bow in the cloud, and it shall be a sign of the covenant between me and the earth. When I bring clouds over the earth, and the bow is seen in the clouds, I will remember my covenant that is between me and you and every living creature of all flesh. And the water shall never again become a flood to destroy all flesh. When the bow is in the clouds, I will see it and remember the everlasting covenant between God and every living creature of all flesh that is on the earth. God said to Noah, "This is the sign of the covenant that I have established between me and all flesh that is on the earth." So God specifically makes a very unique sign for this covenant between God and Noah. And that sign is the rainbow, or what is called the bow here. It's interesting because the Hebrew word for rainbow or bow is bow, but it's in a military type of background. I think what is thought of here is that just as a bow is used in the violence of war, the bow here is to signify that the violence of storms have come and gone, and this bow is to remind you and I that the time of violence is over. Obviously, thankfully, uh, the thunderstorms that the thunderstorms, the rainstorms that we that occur are nowhere near to what was experienced by Noah and his family and the people at that time. There is nothing even close to that same level. Very, very thankful for that. But when it says here, and this is something that I've always thought that is interesting, um, when it says here about God remembering things, again, it doesn't mean that God looks at the bow and he's about to send a lightning bolt and crush everybody. No, not at all. The bow there is not to remind God because he forgot, but it is to show that, yes, there is this covenant between God and people in general. Yes, it was between God and Noah specifically, but it still obviously has a very big outcome for you and I. And so, but at the end of the day, when it comes to it, the sign of the bow in the sky really does benefit you and I to remember the fact that God keeps his promises no matter what. So, no matter if you and I sin one time today or multiple times today, God will always keep his promises. And obviously, that is great in the context of this because there will never be a global flood again. But for me, ultimately, and for every believer of Jesus, the greatest promise is that God kept was that He would send His Son to die for our sin and and give us the opportunity to experience life, eternal life, with Him through the death and resurrection of Jesus. So, with that being said, thank you for spending a little bit of time with me today. On Thursday, we will look at a very interesting point at the end of the life of Noah with his son. So we will look at that on Thursday. But thanks for spending a little bit of time with me here today with the Broadman Word. I will see you on Thursday. Thanks.